Welcome back, folks. Today we are doing our frosting for our donut. We already made our donut, now we need to get to the good stuff, the frosting and the sprinkles. You're going to start out with a ball of clay and flatten it out as best you can, without, of course, making any holes in the clay, and you want to smooth out the cracks as you go along. To help me do this, I have a small carton of water near me so I can get my fingertips wet and get that moisture on the clay to smooth everything out as I go along. I'm not using the table to flatten my clay, I'm just using my palms. If I use the table, the clay is going to stick to the table. So I'm just using my palms. If the clay gets a little bit slippery and has that slickness to it, you can kind of see that it's shiny, that is perfectly fine. You want your clay to have a relatively consistent thickness all the way throughout, because your frosting, that's what we're creating right now, needs to, and you want it to be the same. You also want it to be large enough that it's going to fit over your donut. Once you finish, you gotta check that. So, fits mine pretty dang well. I'm gonna pick it up, and you can do this with a pencil. I'm doing it with just a wooden tool. But I'm drawing in, and I'm gonna clean up my edges of my frosting just a little bit. So I'm drawing in where I plan to cut off and trim my frosting. So be very gentle when you do this, because you don't want your frosting to rip and you don't want to have to start over. If you, again, you can just do this with a pencil or a wooden knife if you have that at your disposal. Make sure to keep those scraps because we'll be using them later. Double check, make sure that it fits really well, and it's looking pretty dang good from where I can see. I'm just making sure that the frosting has that form, and then I'm going to attach it. Right now the clay is not attached. Whenever you add clay together, you have to slip and score, or score and slip, excuse me. And I'm going to mark where my frosting lays, and scoring is drawing parallel lines, and then you're also going to do perpendicular lines, so lines going in both directions, and you have to do this on both pieces of clay that you're attaching. This is super important. If you do not do this, your clay will not stay together. You have to do this. If you don't, it slips off. But if you do, it's going to take a lot for that clay to come apart, okay? Kind of allows the clay to latch onto one another and hook together. So you got to scratch into that clay. The slip is going to be watered down clay. I did put some clay in my water earlier, so we got a little bit of slip in there that I'm going to use when I attach my clay pieces. So the biggest piece, of course, is going to be my frosting. And if you want to use that paintbrush we use to create the donut itself, you definitely can. Get some slip on there and position it back on, line it up with those marks. And we want to make this nice and secure. So press down all the way around on your frosting. And you want to clean up that edge once you press it down. Do not blend your frosting with your donut. If you do that, it defeats the purpose of having the frosting. Don't forget, you need to create that hole for your frosting so we can still see the donut aspect. You can cut it out with a knife, with a pencil, whatever you have at your disposal. And then we're going to push that clay together. It already has scoring on it, so it'll attach and adhere to the clay perfectly fine. I'm using my fingernail to create that line of frosting so it doesn't blend in perfectly with my donut. Looking pretty good. Okay. From there, I'm going to use my excess clay that I had cut off of my frosting. And you want it to be really, really clean. You want your frosting to be really, really clean before you do these details. But I'm going to make a coil. Now you can have your details on your donut be different from mine. If you want to do other details, and I highly would encourage you to do that. But For mine, I'm going to have a strip of some chocolate. So I need to make a coil. I'm going to roll this out, and my coil is going to be pretty small because I just want that chocolate to be pretty thin. So I got to roll it out, and as I'm doing this, I'm adding moisture, grabbing some water, and making sure that I don't break my coil as I'm working. I'm just being very gentle, almost no pressure at all. And my coil's a little bit thick right now, so I'm going to thin it out just a hair more. And I'm going to lay it on top of my donut how I want it to be before I score and slip it on. So I'm going to lay it out. And you got to be really gentle when you do this so you don't break your coil. Got to kind of gently encourage it to twist for you. You got to figure out the best way for it to look. And once you're happy with it, you're going to grab your pencil or whatever tool you happen to be using and just very lightly mark in where that decoration or frosting or chocolate stripe is going to go. Very gently take that off, and you have to score and slip everything so it stays on. So you got to score both sides, of course. So on the coil and then on the donut frosting as well. Again, if you don't, it's gonna come off. So don't forget, super important step. I've had people have their projects completely come apart because they do not score and slip. And that's the first thing I'll ask you. Did you score and slip? And you'll say, oh, not really. As you work, you need to remember to do that. Super important. Grab some of that slip after you score. And gently again, because we don't want to break our coil, back onto the dome. Perfect! And then push that in, make sure it's nice and secure all the way around. And don't blend it into the frosting again. We want that different ledge so it stands out as a detail. Nice. And then you can use a tool, whatever you have at your disposal, to clean up so you're not seeing those scoring marks, because that would take away from the visual image of it, because real donuts don't have scoring marks on them, so we don't want ours to either. Any details from here are going to be totally your choice. I'm going to add a bunch of itty bitty sprinkles, and when I say a bunch, I do mean a bunch, all the way around. So I'm doing teeny tiny coils and making them all over, and I'm making sure that I'm going in different directions when I do this so it looks more realistic, because frosting sprinkles generally don't just lay one way, and we don't want ours to either. And I am literally making sprinkles for like the next minute or two even. So if you want to speed up the video, you definitely can. Otherwise, you can watch me keep making sprinkles. And notice that I'm slipping and scoring every single one that goes on. Alright, once I finished all the sprinkles, I'm going to do a couple last minute things and just take away some clay. I'm going to clean up my edges of my frosting and just kind of thin out my project a little bit more. Do any last defining edges that I want to clean up, make sure it's nice and looking like a donut, because that's the whole point of our project. So I'm going to be taking away and just shaving off a little bit of clay to define that frosting edge a little bit more, making sure everything is nice and smooth all the way around as I am working. Now, if you don't have a wooden tool like I have, you can always use just a wooden knife. If you want to use a pencil, that would work. It's not going to be the best tool, but you can really be versatile with clay. A lot of different materials will work for you. You just have to be open-minded about it. And all I'm doing right now is shaving off some excess that I don't think I need for this one, because I really want that frosting to stand out and have a nice ledge to it. Ledge on that edge. You want that edge to be really soft too. So you'll notice that a little bit of it's sharp right now, and then I'll go in with my fingernail and my pads of my fingertips and soften things up a bit. That's very important. You don't ever want to have sharp areas in your clay, because once it's fired, it will get super sharp, and we don't want our clay to be able to cut us. That would be a problem. So we want it to be safe, and we want it to be a fun thing, not something that becomes dangerous. So make sure you don't have any sharp spots. You can always go in, clean up any other edges or any scoring marks that you still see. But we are pretty close to done here. Just doing the last minute bits, and that is how you do decorations on your donut. Now remember, this is one way to do them. There's lots, and if you wanted to add different things, you definitely could. I'm gonna do some just last minute circles. Now I know these are divots as opposed to standing out, which is what sprinkles would actually do, but just for some different textures. The more designs you do, generally speaking, as long as you're being intentional and have good craftsmanship, the happier you'll be with your end result. Good luck.